describe, because I know we've sort of from your career of being on both sides of your membership and how you've sort of evolved in different parts of the organization. But would love to hear just in your words, sort of your path that brought you through to today and the role that you're leading. In your own words, would be great for the group to hear.
Oh, well, thank you. And again, I'm delighted to be here and honored. Yeah, it's always good to reflect back on one's career and such, and kind of also figure out where you're going, especially during COVID. But yeah, I started under in a science degree, undergrad science, and kind of moved my way through education in various my consulting designation and Six Sigma and so forth. So I think I always boil it down to my parents were maybe not worried, but they thought maybe one day like all of these things will come together. I wasn't following a really and I still am not a kind of a clear path. The doctor is this, a teacher is that, and so forth. So I did start out in actually in the colleges and was a director there, more in the operations role. And it's kind of funny how did I end up there? But I think ultimately I love business, data, and I love problems, and it was a great way to get started in a managerial role. And I look back at that time and think to where I am now, and I think I've changed and progressively continue to grow and change my growth mindset in terms of managing people. I would still say to this day, managing people is probably the most difficult and most rewarding part of the job. I think it's grossly understated there, but yeah. So moved through there, and while working, did my master's degree, and then landed in consulting. And I think still to this day, even though I'm on the other side of the fence, I do feel that I've always been a consultant. I do love those the gray area, the problem solving, difficult issues, and working and collaborating with a team. And then had some kids, and that changes things. I traveled quite a bit, and I'm so lucky I did then at the time. And I would say most of my portfolio wasn't even in Canada, so I spent a lot of time in UK and Brussels, and even into great Middle East parts of the world and so forth. So I look back and I draw on those experiences often. So it's funny, now we're in this digital world and now we have no boundaries. So, and from there, I entered in and worked for KPMG, a pretty large size, one of the four firms. And now I work for CPN Ontario, so on the other side of the fence, and looking at things like the call center, which I think a lot of your membership works in, and that customer experience. I would say I am very customer obsessed and looking at ways of developing a premium experience. Love the Steve Jobs Apple mindset. That's in terms of making it easier for the customer, and yeah. So that's kind of a 50,000 view, but no particular career path, but I think building blocks onto different parts, and I love the challenge.
That's great, and I think the idea of career path these days is something that is it's not linear by any means, and I think so. I don't think you're on your own in that sense. I know I've definitely enjoyed a different path and from that perspective. But and again, I think we both consultants from that perspective, and I remember working on planes late night in different places, and
2x2s.
But no matter what, yeah, exactly. No matter where our laptops are, we are plugged in and ready to go. And I think that sort of primed us well for these days. But and I think that being able to pull those different skill sets and working in different size organizations makes it sort of forces you to understand the customers in different perspectives. And maybe just to give us some scope in terms of vice president of member and student engagement and experience at CPA Ontario, what's included in that? What's sort of on the top 5 sort of task lists or priorities that you would focus on in your team?
Sure. I mean, it does sound like everything in the kitchen sink for sure, because experience is so encompassing, right? So I think to make it more tangible, what it really overlays the whole enterprise, and one of the pieces of work that I am most proud of, and I brought into CP Ontario about three years ago, is being very data driven, with our Net Promoter Score and our value satisfaction metrics that really stem from the start of the student journey till the member experience. So runs through all of the life cycles that you can imagine from a student to member, as well as it hits our call center, our digital self-servicing website, and so forth. So a lot of the metrics, and from that being the most strategic piece, the top of the house, then driving, well, what does that mean from tactics? How do we work from business units? So I'd say another key aspect of my portfolio is our contact center. And what I love about the contact center is that it is the heart of the organization. I can tell you at any point what is happening, what went wrong, what's the pulse, and so forth, right? So I think that just into itself, there's so many metrics and data and that can get gleaned from that, and really trying to turn that around. It's not about the agents and picking up the phone and this and that, but it's like, what's happening in the businesses? And it helps me understand, well, I think we need to re-engineer that business process, or this is happening there. So I think that the call center is, as most have either worked in one or can appreciate, it's a very busy place. It's live. So there's a lot of things that go in there. From the experience piece as well, work with a lot of different business units. So I'm very fortunate that I can straddle that role. And part of my process improvement around the Six Sigma and stuff is looking at how do we make things more efficient and so forth. Again, it's all driven from my Net Promoter Score, my metrics, where we can do better, and looking at even right now bringing in automation and robots, which is super exciting. Like, who knew when I started my career that I would be bringing in automation and these really high tech technical pieces to create efficiency. So like, I'm still learning. Like, there is so much to learn, and I always say to my kids, your job probably hasn't even been created yet. They're still young. So it's kind of interesting to say, I had no idea I'd be doing this, to even the experience part, to putting on events, live streams. Again, with Net Promoter Score, I'm always looking for high impact. So looking at what are those things that can create the mass events that create that positive impact, as well as looking at, because NPS can go either way, right? So if we're going trending negative or positive, where do we have to look at? So I guess also looking at even how we look at our annual member dues payment process. Why would I be involved there? Well, if you want to have a seamless interaction with us, if that's your one engagement with us, we want to make sure it's the best engagement experience that you have. So I would say it's hard, and in terms of straddling different parts of it, but it's also exciting. My day is never the same, right? So it's hard to keep up. I keep a notebook close at hand at all times. So
that's the best way to lead teams, is to constantly sort of be reacting to change and to work through it. You brought up technology, so it's a good segue for me to say thank you to our sponsors for our spotlight interviews that we've been having over the summer and the fall, and that's Microsoft Canada and the Microsoft Dynamics 365 team. And just for context for this group, the team is fully focused on Allison, and stay connected to customers, employees, especially in these rapid times of change. And they've actually put together a resilience playbook on Microsoft at Microsoft.com/together. So ask everyone to check that out from that perspective. I know CPA Ontario uses Microsoft, and you guys are quite a digital savvy shop in lots of different ways. And I had the privilege of going to your office before we were in our homes, dialing in. But maybe just to jump back into, as you were thinking through the process change, driving with the goal of a metric of an NPS change or impact, and using technology, is there an example that you can share of something that you tried to do, maybe it worked or didn't work, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, I think there's lots of great examples, and maybe we can even start with like COVID, for example, right? So and then I can kind of look at other, because I think that's more relevant for folks right now. Is I guess a good example, there's lots, but let's start with a call center, for instance. Like we were based at the office, right? So we weren't set up from a technology perspective. We're not a big shop. We've got about 25 agents, so it's not very big, but it's complex, right? Because we were dealing with regulatory issues and so forth, a lot of finance and so complex issues. So what do? Like I recall that day on Friday. we got to be home by Monday or Tuesday, whenever that date was. And I remember thinking right as COVID came up, we got to pilot this thing. How is this going to work if, say, in a couple of days, we could actually be working from home? So, we've got lots of applications. Like, we just implemented live agent chat, which honestly was our savior, because as you recall, at the start of most people have already implemented that, so we're a little behind the time, but we're catching up close. But I would say at the beginning, as you recall, everybody went from working at the office to home. Our infrastructure, for sure, we're based out of Toronto, where I am anyways, and the phone systems collapsed, right? They just could not manage the flow and so forth. So we didn't have phone lines. And at that time, nobody knew what was going on. Are these events happening? What about my professional development? What about my regulatory obligations? Just a lot of questions. So lucky for us, we had just implemented Live Agent, and that was like an end-to-end seamless application, and it worked to our advantage. And again, you referenced us moving our offices. So at that time in the fall, we were all on the same platform, cloud-based, and so forth. So we were actually set up. I think back, if we weren't, it would have been very difficult. So I think those are really good positive applications. So, I would say, although it did work, and we have been able to move our call center from being like on the land to remote places, it served us well. I would say, because we've got different systems, it sometimes can feel archaic, and we're flipping back and forth from Teams to Avaya to this and that. And I would say there's some work to do. I think that it's hurting our average handle time and so forth. So I would say there's some lessons learned there that we're looking at now, how to better equip ourselves with our technology. And I guess another quick example with even our digital platforms, like we had some platforms, but like everybody else, they had to move from live to digital. I know you guys were in the same boat. So how do you conduct RFPs, due diligence, and get the platform? So I would say because of that, it was a bit of a slow adoption, because those companies did very well in COVID because everybody needed those digital platforms, but we just couldn't get them on fast enough. So some lessons learned there, like you just got to be constantly forecasting the future.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely being able to take that time and listen and react and make those changes. And sometimes we've heard all sorts of stories of contact centers that were putting desktop computers into taxi cabs with people going home, because that's just how they had to react.
I think I did put a screen in the one taxi cab. I won't lie. I think that's I don't think that didn't happen.
I think we've all been there, and then you
walking home with them,
Well, I remember actually going downtown, and we were driving downtown, and it looked like Code of the Apocalypse. You just see people leaving their office with screens under their arm and heading home for however long, and that's been longer than it needs to be. Maybe just to jump into, we talked about sort of the COVID and the change from a workflow perspective, but how did it work from your team? Like, were there tips and tricks that you used to kept connected, different communication approaches or tactics that you've used during COVID to help change, or things that you wish you could have done in hindsight? Lessons learned?
I guess just starting on the positive, and it's more of a motherhood statement, but I think communication, I would say we took even though our CEO, ET, we didn't have all the answers, but I think we really took advantage of having more town halls, right? And they didn't have to be the elaborate town halls that we used to have, live events and so forth. They were quick town halls. We had someone on that even talked about sleep, mental health, and all of these topics. And I think that we do them quite frequently now. Our CEO does send constant communications that are more personal, and I would say like more vulnerable, because we all are vulnerable. And I think it's great. And I think that's helped the team just realize I'm not in this alone. If your situation is you're by yourself, or you've got your working parent, you've got kids everywhere, you're looking after your parents. So I think for us, we had some fun. We did some virtual social hours. Like that was super fun. Like just and did themes and where you do this theme, we did a sports jersey theme, and I think even with our beloved Raptors, there was a lot of fun there too, right? So we tried to bring in the fun and so forth. And I think on the fun side, everybody knows my kids. Like they would just come in the screens, and I think that helped. Bring some levity to it, right? Because no one's judging, no one cares. Like for sure, the CEOs met my kids, and no one cares. Like I think everybody's in it together. Everyone's doing their best. So I think those communications, I think we did really well on the town halls. We're keeping it up, and I think that's the important part. Is we're in this for the long haul. Is that momentum is so important, and just making sure we're just. The big question I think on everybody's mind is when are we going back to the office? And I had a team meeting with the call center the other day, and I really don't know. Maybe January, but we have to just pay attention to the news. And I think it's okay that you don't have the answers, but I think the constant communication is so vital. And it sounds like such a motherhood statement, but I really think in these times you can't over communicate. So, and I think that's really important. Things that we're doing, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree on the communication. There's a few things that we've seen in different clients across our network and organizations. Things we've heard in our spotlight interviews over the summer as well. Is one is just how much the communication is flattened in a lot of ways, where it's sort of senior leadership like direct to everyone, and that they're not always used to at that level. There's usually cascading that happens, and there's reinforcements from that perspective in those team meetings. And so that's something that just is new and different. And how do you lead and have that vulnerability in there as well? The other is that to try and recreate our daily stand-ups and our meetings. And so we have on our team again a morning call that gets everyone going, and we probably could do an end of day call. It's sort of people's days sort of are different things all over the place, but it's that's been a great in different tech businesses I've had. We've done those a lot more sort of religiously on those, but in our team we didn't do it before, and now we did. It's a great sort of ritual that we've pulled from there. But I think that element of people working from home and the idea of great organizations being able to bring your whole self to work. Well, in a lot of ways, you're bringing your whole self to work because your whole self is at home and interrupting this, whether it's a cat or a dog, or there's a package at the door, or there's construction. Like those are all things that happen, and people should be. How do you get comfortable, and how do you sort of keep that mental safety net and finding new habits and routines to live into these new normals? I was wondering, as you've from a membership perspective, you've got, and I know would love to hear a little bit about I'm not sure if you're able to share much about the exam. I've read about it and heard about it.
Yeah.
But for context for those, CPN Ontario organizes the large sort of final exam to become a chartered accountant, and there was having to do a whole new process change on that. But would love to also hear about that, but also how have you seen your membership reacting to the changes that's happened in the last few months, and how have you guys been able to support them as they've had to make those changes as well?
Sure, that's a great talking point, because I think in all full transparency, so our common final exam, CFE, which you've probably heard of it's the big exam that the students need to pass before one of their milestones before they become a member, and it's an intensive 3-day exam. So you can imagine going back to being a student and studying it while working at the same time. It is a big undertaking. And last year, unfortunately, there was some tech issues with uploading and so forth. And look, we learned so much, and we've taken that and we've applied so many lessons learned from that instance. I think all our hearts sank. We empathize, and just also from my role being on the student experience side, it was just really tough. And but you know what? You got to take that, and it can't always be positive all the time. You've got to learn from it, and what are we going to do differently? And I would say it has reshaped our whole organization, even in the little things like if I'm conducting like a digital event, like I always think, and maybe this is also being a mother of three, what could possibly go wrong, right? And you kind of have to scenario plan that as tough as it is, and just think of every single angle. So I think over that, not only were we had been recovering from that event last September, but now we hit COVID, and what are the options, right? The thing is, though, I think the bar that could be put digitally in some other exams could. This one just can't, because it's so important. And everyone's, the question is, why can't you just make it a digital exam? Well, I think it is such a milestone. It's 3 days, and just the comprehension, if there's questions of so forth, we're just not there yet. I think that's somewhere we will be in the future, but for now, it was just too much of an undertaking. So we were really decided. The real question was, do we do it? And how do we do it in COVID, in person, or do you cancel it? And I think that just shows our commitment to the students and our membership. We didn't want to cancel, so we said, okay, well, let's go for it. And just in terms of scope, you're talking about 4,000 members or students in Ontario that had to take this. So and it's sort of a positive news story. So to do this properly, COVID and friendly and so forth, we had to work with, I think, 48 different hotels, right? So also working with different industries. And I think during COVID, it was a really positive story in terms of how do we make this and revolve it and make it safe and so forth. So you can just imagine, just the CP alone, non-COVID, is heavy logistics and the technology. For this one, what we did was we supplied the laptops. So you had to load the laptops. You had to have protocols, even to like thinking about who's touching the button on the elevator, right? All those safety precautions. But our team did a phenomenal job. And not only do I think we recovered, but it just showed again our commitment. So we did get the whole almost 4,000 students writing this 3-day exam. And, there's little logistic bumps and bruises. There has to be, but nothing that was like last year. So all the lessons learned and getting the students through it. So we're really proud of it. And I think there's many lessons learned there.
I think it's great. I think it's a great news story on thinking about like the scale of that logistics, and amidst it's one thing to say, okay, well, we had 4,000 people write an online exam, and that in itself would be difficult, but the fact that you had the in-person logistics amongst the tensions, and again with the goal of, yes, we're having to react to the world, but we still need to accredit new members. We still need to keep moving forward on that front, which is great for people to be part of. I'm sure everyone was excited to be done with the exam more than those. That's the best.
I think so. I think yeah. I mean, it was hot, like as you can imagine with anything like that kind of scale, and COVID, and making sure everyone was safe, and just thinking of all the volunteers needed, and you had to like pretty much double, triple things, right? So there was no, I would say that the team did a phenomenal job. Like no stone was left unturned. Everybody thought through every scenario and so forth. So I think we're really proud of that. And I think kind of to your next question, our members, what we've done for them is we also provided a number of resources free, so they could get their CPD, stay abreast of things. That was early on in the spring. We also, like many other organizations, we pushed back the annual member dues, and we looked at just the sensitivities and other things that we needed to consider. But overall, I think the response has been really positive, and we're still continuing to look at ways to support our members and students. I constantly, aside from our Net Promoter Score, our bigger enterprise survey, I do also survey, monthly in terms of how people are feeling, what else can we do? So we've always got the pulse of the members and students. So the one other initiative that I'll just talk about briefly is our Accounting for Bravery. And that was more so about giving back to COVID and the frontline workers. And again, I think early on, our CEOs challenged us, what are we going to do? And we already do for 52 years tax prep assistance. So that's doing tax returns for the vulnerable Ontario population. So we do have a very steady base, and this is something that's kind of core to our knitting, how to help people through their tax returns. So how do we transform that? I remember writing on napkins, oh, okay, virtual, we've always done it in person. So maybe going back to your earlier question of moving to more technologies, we needed, first of all, to figure out how are we going to do this virtually. Getting this, the CRA, calling them, they were very on board with us. They are a true partner when we do our tax prep regular program. So they were so excited and supportive, and helped us figure out how to enable this, because there's a lot of logistics with that, and with all the fraud and so forth right now, and the phishing and the cybersecurity. You can imagine transferring personal data across the wires is tricky. So how do we prevent that and so forth? So setting up secure places to download and so forth. So again, logistically, and in a short time, I think we literally had a couple of days to then work with the firms, small firms, get our volunteers up and ready, and then put out the call to the frontline workers. So in that kind of 30 days, we were able to help over 2,000 frontline workers. We had such strong participation for our members. And I would say it wasn't so much about our members and what we're doing for them, but as our 93,000 member community, how do we give back? And I think everyone's like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, Allison, but I'm going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out together. Yeah. And it was such a collaboration of the big four firms, as well as our small to medium firms, and just the general members at large. So I would say we're really proud of that. And, looking at ways to give back, especially with the frontline workers at the beginning, giving so much of their time.
Absolutely. And I just love that rallying cry that you guys sort of rose to, and saying, how do we help back? What can we do from our perspective? Which I think is you hear these stories, and I think it's one of the things I wish the media, we told these stories more often of organizations that are doing all the things that you're doing. So we're excited to hear that story, because I think it's just, people want to hear it, and how our organizations being able to take their thing. They might not know how they can do it, but if they take that step back, and I think it's that we see that vision, we see what we want to do, and I think that's what will get us all through the next few months and years to come, as we recover from all the things that are happening.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I want, maybe just as you cast that look forward, this sort of as we sort of wrap up, that sort of question as we look forward, is what are some of the things that you're seeing as you plan for 2021? Like what's on the horizon? What are some of the design parameters that you're thinking through, and how are you thinking about that from a logistics and a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I think it's on the minds of most. And I think my one word answer is technology, right? Yeah. I think what, if anything, and I think someone phrased it, I'm not going to let going to take advantage of the pandemic, right? There are some positives, as much as this is a horrendous, it's got so much impact. I think there's, sometimes it's like, to your point, what's the positive that we can take out of this? And I think what it has done, at least for our organization and for me as an individual, it's pushed the digital fluency further than we could have ever expected, because we were forced to do it, right? So I think that how we look at, we're going to be more efficient. How can we, streamline? How can we better bring on technology to do kind of those mundane things? Like, for example, I mentioned robotics and automation, taking away those swivel chair things so that humans could do more intellectual thinking and so forth. So I'm looking at, even the things in the call center. Well, how can I look at my technology today, and how do I need to look at it forward? So I think really looking at also these up and coming companies. I think when you're looking specifically at technology, and I, even as for instance, in a project right now, I'm looking at 2 front runner leaders, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will be that in 6 months. It's changing so quickly that you have to look at what's happening. There's so many consolidations, acquisitions, and so forth. So I think you should just really continue to challenge yourself. Maybe start small and kind of expand out. Definitely collaborate amongst the organization, find those kind of wins. And because I don't like, technology is, we just got to continue to think how it's going to impact us, because we're not going to go back to the way we were. I think that's just the reality when everyone's like, well, when are we going back to normal? And like, this is the new normal, right? And I think that's okay. Like, I think it's kind of, you just maybe embrace it and be excited about it to find those new opportunities and try to take those good things that we used to do and how do you pivot them. So I'm trying to continue to have that mindset because it says being doom and gloom and really looking at my team and challenging it, and even the CEO trying to often challenge ourselves with things that we can do better. So I think it's just looking and thinking about the future of technology, like just having that foresight of what it could do.
Absolutely. I think being able to think about it and plan for it, and in some cases just jump in and start working towards it. It's never going to be perfect, and it's even with the best laid plans, it's going to be messy at the beginning, and you need to work through it and iterate and keep pushing through. And I think that's a great sort of nod to leave on. Is there anything that and to wrap up with? Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think that you just wanted to share with the group before we wrap up?
Um, well, again, thank you for having me. It's an honor. Like I said, I think that I'm really trying to have that growth mindset and be really positive because that sometimes the days are long and we're getting into this like colder winter season. And I think, like I tell even my kids, my husband and, the team, like you got to take the small wins. And sometimes we don't
Yeah.
celebrate them enough. And that sounds like a motherhood statement, but I think you just have to stay positive. And when you need a break, you need a break. And I think that we just all have to remember we're in this together. And even a month from now, who knows what it's going to look like. But I think you got to try to stay as positive as possible and not. We have the saying in this house is you keep your problems small with the kids, right? You just got to
Yeah.
keep everything small. Otherwise, it just is almost, it just gets almost overwhelming. So I try to keep my list. I always have like a shopping list of like 2 or 3 things that I can scratch off per day. And that
Yep.
feels really good. Right.
Totally.
So, I wish everybody well. And, we'll see what we're going to look like at the end of this. Right. Better. We'll be better.
No, those absolutely, and those messages of keeping that positive mindset, being able to tackle the things that you can, and knowing what you can't sometimes get to is, I think, is super important. Um, but Al, you touched on so many great things of how do you lead change against your goal. So you're talking about the MPS and thinking about the members from that perspective, reacting with a team in terms of turbulent times, leveraging technology as you've used. And I think you've contextualized that with some very specific ways that CPA Ontario has led that change, and that's sort of what these spotlight interviews are really about, is hearing some of those stories from leaders like yourself who are leading the change. And I'm excited to stay in touch on the challenges. I'm excited I don't have to write an exam
Yes.
coming up, but I'm proud of those who do. And the Accounting for Bravery is a great initiative as well. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to say thanks again to Microsoft Canada and the Dynamics 365 team. We'll be sending out a link to the Microsoft.com/together, which has got a great resilience playbook and a great resource as people think about change and the elements that we were discussing today, but also things to take care of and be thinking about going forward. So thank you, Microsoft. Most importantly, thank you, Allison, for your time. I always enjoy hearing what you're up to, and look forward to being in touch. So thank you very
Great.
much,
Thank you.
and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.